presidential campaigns in the coming days will outline their vision for the economy. So I'm hoping you can kind of level set for us. What is the reality of what you are seeing with American consumers right now?
Well, in our consumer base of 60 million customers spending every week, what you're seeing is they're spending at a rate of growth over this year over last year for July and August so far, about 3%. That is half the rate it was last year at this time. And so the consumers slowed down. They have money in their accounts, but they're depleting a little bit. They're employed, they're earning money. But if you look at it, they've really slowed down. So the Fed is in a position they have to be careful that they don't slow down too much. Right now, where they are spending at is consistent where they spent in 17, 18, 19, a low inflation, more normal growth economy.
I saw in one of your Bank of America reports that, and you just alluded to this, more price sensitivity and that savings accounts are being diminished.
Yeah.
That would suggest people really are not bringing in enough that they have to go into their savings. Like, is this all just inflation that's pressuring?
If you look across different segments of earnings power, those answers are somewhat different. But if you look at overall, there's been a lot of money moved to instruments that pay higher interest rates out of the checking accounts. They cleaned up because it went from 0% interest to 5% interest. And so if you remove that, basically the people who had an account with us in January 2020 before the pandemic, you look at them now, they're still sitting with much more, even inflation adjusted, much more in their account. The problem is it started drifting down, which indicates that they're using that money now to maintain their lifestyle. That's not that unusual in the summer months, frankly, because of travel and vacations and everything.
Right.
And where the money is being spent by our consumers is on those types of experiences. But if you look within it, they're still going to restaurants and they're taking travel, but on the other hand, they're spending a little bit less. They're going to the food store the same number of times, spending a little bit less, which means they're basically finding bargains and things like that. And you're seeing corporations cut price to respond to that. And so it's the way the economy works, and it's slowing down. And that's where we have to be careful, because we've won the war on inflation. It's come down. It's not where people want it yet, but we got to be careful that we don't try to get so perfect that we actually put us in recession. But our team is a great team at Bank of America Research, does not have any recession predicted anymore. Last year, this time, it was a recession. This year, we talked about now there's no recession. And basically, they say we go to 2% growth to 1.5% growth over the next 6 quarters. It kind of bump along at that growth rate, plus or minus 2%.
And they're betting that in September, the Federal Reserve does go ahead with an interest rate cut.
Yeah, and I think that's the market consensus is actually more cuts than our team is. Ours is 2 this year, September, December, 4 next year, and a couple next year. But I think one of the concepts you hear out there a lot, Margaret, is this concept of higher for longer. The reality is our team, and most people think, will settle with 3.5% Fed funds rate, which is much different than the last 15, 17 years people have lived in. So people came into the business world, in 2007, 2008, have not seen this kind of interest rate environment. And so we're getting back to normal. And that's going to take a while for people to adjust to, both on the corporate side and commercial side and on the consumer side.
So about now is political leaders influencing or overriding economists in setting the Fed funds rate and setting interest rates.
I think
what would be the implication of that?
I think if you look around the world's economies and you see where central banks are independent and operate freely, they tend to fare better than the ones that don't. And so I think that's kind of the American way. It's been that way. Does that stop people from giving the Chair Powell advice or other people? No, I give them advice. So we all give them advice. And so I think we got to be careful. When he goes up and does the Humphrey Hawkins, he gets lots of advice about where rates should go. So there's a lot of people have a view of it, but their job is to sort through it all and say what's best for the U.S. economy on those 2 dimensions you talked about and be consistent. I think right now, Brian Moynihan giving advice is they got to be more careful to the downside of not starting to move down rates to restore a feeling that there's light at the end of the tunnel. They've told people rates probably aren't going to go up, but if they don't start taking them down relatively soon, you could dispirit the American consumer. Once the American consumer really starts going very negative, then it's hard to get them back. And on the commercial side, the higher rate environment is slowing down commercial progress. So corporations aren't using their lines of credit, middle market, small businesses. They've gone backwards in the use of lines of credit. So why don't they use a line of credit? Either there is an opportunity or the cost is high or both. And right now, that's a little bit they're worried about the future. So I think right now it's time for them to start to become a little more accommodative and take off the restrictions and let the thing go. So I'm giving them advice. Everybody does. And I think a strong central bank has to take all that advice and process it.
It's not unusual during a political campaign